At my husband's funeral, I opened his Qur'an to read for him, and a folded letter slipped out and landed on my lap. For a second, I thought it was a receipt or a page marker. I picked it up with shaking hands, because the ink looked old, and the crease was soft, like something touched many times. When I opened it, I saw a name I knew, and a date I could not forget, and the world around me went quiet, even though people were crying and the imam was reciting. The room was full of family, the smell of rosewater in the air, the whisper of dua and the soft scraping of chairs. I could hear someone sobbing behind me, and still my ears rang as if I had been far away. It felt like the ground moved under my feet, but my face did not change. I pressed the letter back inside the pages, closed the Qur'an, and kissed it as if I had not seen anything. It was his handwriting. I would know his letters anywhere, the way his alif stood tall and his dots looked like tiny tears. There was also another hand on the paper, a woman's hand, smooth and careful. I could not read more than a few lines before my vision blurred, and I could feel something inside me crack, like ice thawing too fast. I looked at my husband's face one last time before the men took him to the graveyard. His face was calm, as if asleep after a long day of work. He had that same gentle line at the corner of his mouth, the little line that would deepen when he smiled as if he were almost shy. I put my palm on the cover of the Qur'an and whispered, "Ya Allah, give me sabr. Help me stand," my heart said. What do you do when the person you trusted with your breath, your bread, and your prayers leaves a secret in the book that taught you to be honest? If you had been there, you would have seen an old woman holding a Qur'an and nodding as people offered condolences. You would have believed I was strong. I told myself to breathe, to be patient, to not cause a scene. I told myself I could not make sense of life in a room full of neighbors and cousins. Later, I promised. Later I will sit alone with Allah. I will open the letter again. I will face whatever He has written for me. But I did not know then how deep the letter would cut into the story I thought I knew. My name is Fatima, and by the time you hear this, I have lived a long life. My hands are soft now, but marked with small burns from old pots and little scars from cutting onions too fast. My hair is white under my scarf, and my knees complain when I stand from sujood. When I look back, my life feels like a string of mornings and evenings, calls to prayer and cups of tea, the sound of children laughing, and then the quiet when they grow up and leave. I grew up in a small house with a courtyard, the walls painted in a color that faded under the sun. We were not rich, but we were held together by my mother's patience and the smell of her bread. She used to say, "Sabr, my daughter. Patience is not sitting still. It is walking slowly with a heavy heart and trusting that Allah is watching your steps." Those words shaped me more than any school lesson. I carried them into my marriage like a lamp. I married young, the way many of us did. My aunt introduced me to a man named Yusuf, and I remember the first time I saw him. He stood by the door, not too tall, hands rough from work, eyes gentle and steady. He said, "Assalamu alaikum," so softly, as if he was greeting the room itself. I was nervous, but when I looked at his face, I felt my shoulders loosen. He asked me about my mother's health and my favorite dish. He smiled with his eyes more than his mouth. We had a small wedding, only family and a few neighbors. There was a big pot of rice and lamb, there were dates and tea, and someone brought an old tape recorder that played nasheeds in a shaky voice. I remember the henna on my hands and the way the women ululated when I walked in. I remember the way Yusuf looked at me in the middle of all that noise, a quick look that said, "We are in this together." It was enough. Our first home was a rented room above a tailor shop. The air always smelled like fabric and soap, and in summer the heat rose through the floor. Yusuf worked at a carpenter's workshop, making chairs and doors with careful hands. He would come home with sawdust in his hair, and I would brush it off like snow. We would count coins at the end of the week and plan our meals. He made me a wooden table from leftover pieces, and it became the heart of our home. From the beginning, there was faith in our days. At Fajr, the call to prayer would float through the window, a soft hum waking the sky. Yusuf would wash his face, and come to the prayer mat with wet hair, and I would stand by his side. He had a small green Qur'an with a worn cover that he kept wrapped in a white cloth. After Fajr, he would read quietly, his lips moving, his finger tracing the lines. Sometimes a tear would slide down his cheek for reasons he did not say. I learned to sit close in silence, to let the words fill the room like light. We had happy days and hard days like any couple. There were months when the work was slow and we ate lentils and bread with gratitude. There were nights when we laughed so hard we cried. The first time I burned the rice, Yusuf ate it anyway and said, "It tastes like the sea," and we both laughed until we were out of breath. He was not a man of many words, but when he spoke, it was to calm. He had a way of making the world feel smaller and kinder than it was. We hoped for children and were tested. I lost a baby early on, and I still remember the empty quiet of the days after. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the sunlight move across the wall, hour by hour, and I wondered if my body had failed me. Yusuf held my hand and said, "Allah gives and Allah takes. Don't blame yourself, Fatima." He bought me a small plant with a single green leaf and told me to take care of it with love. "We will take care of each other," he said. We did. Years later, Allah blessed us with 2 children. Our daughter, Amina, came first, a soft bundle with a strong cry. Our son, Omar, came 2 years later, his eyes wide and curious. The house changed with their presence. There were toys under the table and little socks on the balcony line. There were sticky fingers on the cupboard doors and giggles at night when they should have been asleep. Yusuf would come home and lift them in the air, and they would grab at his beard and squeal. Our life settled into a rhythm that felt simple and true. In the morning, I would make chai with cardamom, and Yusuf would sit on the rug with the Qur'an in his lap. Our children would run around us with their own games as if the world was soft and safe. In the afternoon, I would open the window and let the smell of the street in fresh bread from the bakery, the iron smell of rain when the clouds were kind. We had little, and yet we had everything we needed. I thanked Allah often, and even on the days I forgot, He still gave. Yusuf was a man of routine and small mysteries. He had a small notebook he sometimes wrote in late at night. He kept it in a drawer with an old lock. When I asked what he wrote, he would say, "Du'as, thoughts, little things." I did not push. I believed trust was also a kind of ibadah, a way to worship, and no marriage can survive without it. Besides, he never gave me a reason to doubt him. Sometimes, though, I would catch him looking far away, as if watching a memory that I could not see. He would stare at the door or at the place where the sun hit the wall and go quiet. When I asked, he would smile and say, "It's nothing." Once, on a Friday afternoon, I saw him take a small flower and leave the house. He returned after Maghrib, tired and thoughtful. He told me he went to the cemetery to read Fatiha. "For whom?" I asked, but he kissed the top of my head and said, "For those who left before us." I did not ask more. The Qur'an was always close to him, the green cover worn at the edges by his thumb. He would keep a folded paper inside it, and I assumed it was a list of du'as or a verse he was trying to memorize. Once I teased him, "Do you hide secrets in there?" He laughed softly. Who would hide anything in Allah's book? His eyes held something then, a flicker, and it passed before I could catch it. Maybe I did not want to. We raised our children with the little wisdom we had. We taught them to say Alhamdulillah before eating, and to say Bismillah when leaving the house. We corrected them when they lied. We sat with them on the mat and read short surahs together. Yusuf had a way of teaching that made them feel brave. "You can do hard things," he would say, "if you ask Allah and try." He also taught them to fix things, how to hammer a nail, how to tighten a loose leg on a stool. He fixed many things in our home. I wonder now if there were things in his heart he could not fix. Amina grew into a bright and kind young woman who loved to read. She would curl up by the window with a book, her scarf slipping as far as it could without falling. Omar was restless, always outside, always coming home with a scraped knee or a stray cat following him. Our house was noisy then. We took turns being tired and being patient. Life felt like a long breath. I worked part-time cleaning at a school, then later I took in sewing, hemming long skirts, and fixing uniforms. We saved for little dreams, new curtains, a proper rug, a better kettle that did not whistle like a crying baby. Sometimes, we argued over small things, like salt in the soup, or money spent on something that could have waited. We would go to sleep with our backs turned, and in the morning he would make me tea as a quiet apology, and I would cut an extra slice of bread for him as mine. We were not a perfect story. We were real, and we were trying, and that was enough. When the children left, the house changed again. Their rooms held their shadows. The nights were quiet in a way that felt heavy at first. We learned to adjust to the sound of our own breaths. We began to talk more about our younger days, telling stories we had told before, each time with a new detail. He reminisced about the first chair he made without his boss's help. I told him about the neighbor's rooster that used to follow me around when I was a girl. We laughed at the same lines as if they were new. As we aged, Yusuf's health began to slow him down. His hands hurt in winter. His back complained when he bent. He developed a cough that did not like to leave. Still, he went to the mosque when he could, leaning on his cane, greeting everyone with that respectful nod. Sometimes I would watch him from the window, my fingers wrapped around the curtain, making dua under my breath that Allah would keep his steps firm. He would look up at the window before turning the corner and lift his hand, just a little, as if waving at my prayer. He began to stay home more in the last year. He read more, he wrote more in his small notebook, and we listened to the Qur'an on the radio together. He still kept that folded paper inside the green Qur'an. I noticed he moved it sometimes to mark his place. One night, as we were folding laundry, he took my hand, looked at me for a long moment, and said, "Fatima, forgive me for every time I made you worry." I thought it was the way old people speak, gathering kindness before the end. I squeezed his hand and said, "I forgive you for the things I know and the things I don't. You forgive me too." He smiled, and his eyes grew wet. When the cough got worse, we went to the clinic. The doctor spoke gently. He used words that sounded serious, even though he chose the kind ones. I saw Yusuf's face and how it did not change, just as it never did when life was heavy. He thanked the doctor and put his shoes on slowly. When we walked home, he talked about the price of tomatoes. I knew then that he was protecting me, the way he always did, by making the world small enough for us to carry. In those last days, he began to wake me before Fajr and ask me to sit close while he read. Sometimes, he would recite aloud, and his voice would shake on certain verses about forgiveness, about Allah's mercy, about the day we will all stand without secrets. I would stare at the patterns on the carpet and listen to my heart beat. He would kiss my forehead after we prayed and say, "Alhamdulillah, another morning." I nodded, counted blessings, and tried not to count fears. The night before he passed, he asked for water and then for his Qur'an. He held it like a friend and kept it on his chest until he slept. I watched his chest rise and fall, the Qur'an rising and falling with it. I fell asleep in the chair, with my hands folded in my lap. In the morning, when the light came in, his breathing had changed. He opened his eyes and smiled at me. It was a small smile, as if he could not make a big one anymore. He said, "Fatima, remember, Allah is kind." Then he whispered the Shahada, and his grip on my fingers loosened. The house filled with people after, because, in our culture, grief is not a private thing. The women washed dishes and brought food I did not taste. The men moved chairs and whispered. I sat with the Qur'an in my lap because it felt like holding a part of him. The cover was warm from his hands. The ribbon hung between Surah Maryam and Taha, where he had been reading last. I opened it to read for him, to gift him the words we both loved. That is when the paper slipped out, a white fold against the dark carpet. I picked it up. I told myself it was a bookmark. I saw the name, I saw the date. I felt the ground tilt. I closed it. I put it back. I told myself, not now. Be strong. The room was full of eyes and love and sadness. Grief has an order in our world. First we bury, then we search for meaning. But Allah had already placed a door in front of me, and my hand had already touched the handle. I just did not walk through it yet. When the men came to take him to the graveyard, I held the Qur'an to my chest and watched them lift his body. My heart made a sound that my throat did not. I wanted to run after them, but I sat. I told myself to be patient. I told myself to breathe like my mother taught me slowly, even when your heart is running. I did not know that in the pages of the book I trusted most, a secret was waiting to change every story I had told myself about my life. Later, when the house grew quiet, I would open that folded paper and read every line. I would find a truth that was older than my children and deeper than our small kitchen table. I would speak to Allah more than I had in years. I would learn that forgiveness is not a door you walk through once, but a path you walk for as long as you live. But that is for later. For now, all you need to know is that the letter was there, and it was not meant for my eyes. Rising conflict. The house felt too big that night. Everyone went home after Isha. The plates were stacked, the carpets were rolled back into place, the chairs put where they always went. The smell of rosewater was fading. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick a little softer, as if it did not want to disturb me. I boiled water for tea I did not drink. I took down 2 cups by habit, and then I put one back. I stood by the stove and watched the steam rise, and I pressed my palm against the counter to keep my balance. In the other room, the green Qur'an lay on a folded scarf like a guest that refused to leave. The thought of the folded paper inside it beat like a drum in my chest. I told myself to pray first. I spread the prayer mat. I stood, I raised my hands, and I whispered, Allahu Akbar, into the quiet. My voice sounded old and small. I prayed like a person who is trying to walk through water. I made dua for Yusuf, for his soul to be given light, for his grave to be spacious, for his sins to be forgiven. And then, in a small voice, I asked, Ya Allah, guide me, give me sabr, show me what to do with what I found. After prayer, I went to the Mistai, Qur'an. I sat cross-legged with my back against the wall because my knees were tired. I placed the Qur'an on the small wooden rihal that Yusuf had made for me when we were younger. I opened to where the ribbon lay, between Maryam and Taha. The paper slid again, as if it knew it belonged to my hands now. I picked it up slowly. I looked at the top line, without really meaning to. A name sat there like a stone dropped into a pond. Zara. The date was written in small numbers on the top right corner. I could not breathe for a second. My eyes moved over the date the way you move your hand over a burn. I knew that date, and my body remembered it before my mind did. I closed the paper with a shake and pressed it to my chest. Astaghfirullah, I whispered. Astaghfirullah. I sat there until the tea on the stove went cold and the room turned dark. I did not read more. I folded the paper small and put it back in the Qur'an, the way you tuck something under a pillow so it does not fall. I wrapped the Qur'an in its white cloth and placed it on the highest shelf, the one where I keep old letters and the keys we never use. I slept little that night. The bed felt unfamiliar. His side was neat because I had not had the heart to mess it up. I kept reaching my hand out in the dark and stopping myself, as if gestures could bring back what Allah had taken. In the morning, the adhan for Fajr came from far away, a gentle sound sliding through the window. I got up, washed my face, and prayed. I did not open the Qur'an. I made myself busy with small things. I folded a towel that did not need folding. I swept a floor that did not need sweeping. Sometimes, when the heart is full, the hands must be busy. Late in the morning, Amina came. She is a careful visitor, always knocking twice and then waiting, even though she has a key. She brought fresh bread in a paper bag and a little jar of honey. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but when she saw my face, she smiled the way daughters do when they are trying to be stronger than they feel. She kissed my forehead and said, "Mama, how are you?" "I am here," I said. "Alhamdulillah." We sat at the table and ate small bites in silence at first. She looked around like people do when someone is missing. She touched the back of his chair. She looked at the spot on the wall where the sun usually lands in the morning. She asked me about the paperwork, about money, about the workshop. Omar will go tomorrow to speak to the men, she said. Baba left some things written down, I think. He talked about an envelope in the drawer for Sadaqah to be given when he passed. Do you know where it is? In the small drawer by the bed, I said quietly. He told me too. She nodded, grateful, and I felt a sting in my eyes. He had planned even his last act of charity. He was this kind of man. Her eyes moved to the shelf. She saw the white cloth. Baba's Qur'an, she said softly. Should we keep it with us? Omar was thinking he could keep it at his place for a while. The kids will read from it. I felt my stomach tighten. I kept my face calm. Let it stay with me for now, I said. When I join your father, you can keep it. For now, I will read for him. She looked at me with those eyes that see through me sometimes. She pressed my hand. Of course, she said. Mama, if you need anything, call. If you want company, I can stay. I shook my head. No, I said, you have your home. I have to make peace with mine again. She kissed my cheek and left the bread and honey. When the door closed, the quiet came back like a wave. In the afternoon, I went to Yusuf's workshop with Omar. The road there is lined with small shops that never change shoe repair, a place that sells spices, a barber who has cut the same hair for 30 years. The men at the workshop stood when I entered. They shook my hand and said kind words. They told me stories about him that made me smile and cry in the same breath. Your husband was a patient man, one said. He would start over if the wood split, even if we were behind. He always left early on the first Friday of the month, another said, as if telling me something sweet. He would say, I have a visit to make. He always had a small bottle of rosewater in his pocket on that day. My heart dropped and then tried to climb back up to where it belonged. I nodded and made a sound that could have been anything: agreement, sadness, memory. On the way home, I noticed a blue gate on a small street I had passed 100 times. The paint was peeling, and there was a mulberry tree that leaned over it, dropping small dark fruit on the sidewalk. A cat slept in the shade of it. A woman came out and shook a carpet from her balcony. She had a face I did not know. I kept walking. My feet felt heavy, as if each step had to be decided. At home, I washed the 2 cups we had used in the morning and put them on the rack to dry. The sound of water and the clink of porcelain felt louder than usual. I dried my hands and went to the shelf. I took down the Qur'an and sat again on the rug. I opened to the letter. I looked at the name and the date again, as if maybe I had made a mistake the first time. My hand shook. I took a deep breath. Bismillah, I said, with Allah's name. I opened the fold. The first lines were in a woman's hand, clear, round letters, careful spacing. The ink had faded to a soft brown, but the words were stronger than any color. Assalamu alaikum, Yusuf, it said. Forgive me for writing. I know you asked me not to. I gave birth to our child last night. She came small and strong, alhamdulillah. I will not ask you to come. Your wife is expecting. It is not right to hurt her. Send what you can. I will call her Aliyah, because she lifted me when I was falling. May Allah forgive us. My hands tightened until my fingers hurt. I looked at the date again. It was the day my body had failed to hold life. It was the day I lay in a hospital room and stared at a chipped ceiling and counted the squares to stop myself from crying. It was the day Yusuf had sat by me and rubbed my arm and told me Allah gives and Allah takes, and that we were still us. While I held emptiness, somewhere not far, his child took her first breath. I put the paper down and pressed my hands against my face. I felt the heat in my cheeks. I did not cry right away. I just sat, and the room tilted around me as if I had stood up too fast. I whispered, Ya Allah, not as a question, but as a call to the only one who knows everything. I picked the paper up again, read the lines again, as if maybe the letters would rearrange into another meaning. Below those lines, in a different ink, was Yusuf's writing. His letters were thin and tall, familiar to me like the ridges of my own fingers. Wa alaikum assalam, Zara, he had written. May Allah forgive us both. I will send support every month. I will leave it under the mulberry tree by your gate. I will not knock. I will stand far and see her if you allow. I give her the name Aliyah in my heart. Do not come near my home. My wife's heart is kind, and I will not break it. May Allah hide our faults and write good for the child. I could see the mulberry tree in my mind. I could see the blue gate. I could see the rose water bottle. Things that had been separate pieces in my life clicked together into a picture I did not want to see. My ears rang. I looked up at the ceiling and followed the cracks with my eyes until I could find my breath again. I folded the letter closed with fingers that did not want to obey me. I wrapped the Qur'an again in the white cloth and put it back on the shelf. I stood up slowly, putting a hand on the wall, because my knees did not feel like they belonged to me anymore. I went to the sink and ran cold water and let it run over my wrists and the back of my neck. I whispered, Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah, on a loop, like a bead rolling around a string. When my breath calmed, I sat at the table and stared at the wooden surface Yusuf had made, the grain of the wood like lines on a wise person's hand. My emotion did not know where to land. Anger rose, and then it fell. Love rose, and then it felt foolish. Confusion was the most loyal. It sat in the chair across from me and watched me with a steady face. In the evening, the doorbell rang. I wiped my face and opened. A neighbor I knew well, Huda, stood there with a pot of soup and a small tin of sweets. I made too much, she said, which is another way to say, I know you are not cooking. Also, she added in a lower voice, a woman came earlier, an older woman. She asked if you were receiving visitors. She looked like someone who wanted to be invisible. She left when I told her to come back later. She did not leave her name. I nodded slowly. If she comes again, tell her to come, I said. It is a house of grief. The door is open. Huda touched my sleeve and left. I put the soup on the stove. I did not eat any. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling again, like a woman who has lost something and does not know where to look. I remembered a day long ago when I had seen a little girl at the market with hair like a cloud and eyes that looked too old for her face. She was holding a piece of bread in two careful hands, as if it was a delicate thing. She had stood under a mulberry tree and looked up at the fruit like she was waiting for one to fall into her palm. Yusuf had been with me that day. He had stood very still for a moment. He had squeezed my hand. I had asked, "Are you okay?" He had said, "Yes." I had smiled at the girl, and she had smiled back. I did not think about it again until now. The next morning, I went to the cemetery. I did not tell anyone I was going. The guard at the gate nodded at me. The ground was still damp from the night's rain. The air smelled like wet grass and stone. I walked slowly between the lines of markers, reading the names the way people read a list and wait for a familiar word. I found her. Zara bint Salem. The stone was simple. The dates told me she had left this world years ago, when our children were already grown. A small, dried flower lay on the stone. I did not need to ask who had left it. I stood there and read Al-Fatiha for a woman I had known by name only, a woman who had lived a story next to mine without me knowing. I whispered, "May Allah forgive you, and forgive me, and forgive him. We all did the best we knew, and sometimes the best is not enough." On the way back, I stopped by the blue gate. My feet took me there without asking permission from my mind. The mulberry tree trembled in a small wind. A woman opened the gate and stepped out. She was younger than me by many years. She had a face that could have belonged to any of our daughters. She glanced at me, polite but distant. I said nothing. I moved on. It was not time yet. My heart was too loud. When I returned home, Omar was waiting with papers and a serious face. He spread them on the table like a map. "Mama, Baba had some small savings," he said. "We need your signature here and here. Also, There are transfers every month to someone. He kept no names in the notes, just a number. It could be charity. He always helped. He looked at me with a question sitting in his eyes. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. Your father gave in secret, I said. He believed charity given in silence is beloved. Omar nodded. Yes, he said. He was a good man. He said it like a fact. He collected the papers and kissed my head. I will come tomorrow, he said. Rest, Mama. After he left, I went to the drawer where Yusuf kept his small notebook. I opened it with the old key he had given me years ago, but which I had never used. The pages were filled with verses, du'as, and small notes. On some months, a line that said, for A. It could have been for Amina, it could have been for anything, but in my mind, it meant Aliyah, a girl I had never held and yet now felt strangely tied to. I closed the notebook. I placed it back with careful hands. I sat on the floor with the prayer mat under me and looked at the Qur'an on the shelf. The house felt like it had two worlds now. One where I cooked and prayed and talked to my children. Another where a folded letter sat and pulled at the edges of everything I thought I knew. Night came again like a soft curtain. I turned off the lights and left only the small lamp on the table. I made a cup of tea with cardamom and held it between my palms until it cooled. I did not want to be a woman who lived with suspicion as a companion. That is a bitter meal to chew every day. I wanted to be a woman who lived with truth, even if truth was a hard bread. I wanted to decide what to do, with this secret with my eyes open. After Isha, I made wudu again. The water was cold, and it woke me up. I prayed 2 rak'ahs and asked Allah to make my heart soft and my mind clear. If knowing this will help me do good, let me know, I whispered. If knowing this will only break me, put a veil between me and it. Then I went to the shelf and took down the Qur'an again. I unfolded the letter. I decided to read every line, slowly, like a person walking a road with stones in it, but who must walk anyway. Number turning point. The paper crackled softly in my hands. It had the weight of years. It had been folded and unfolded many times before me. The creases were soft, like old skin. I could see where a drop of water had fallen long ago and made the ink bloom like a flower. I read the woman's words again, but this time I kept going. She has your eyes, she wrote. When she looks at me, I remember the time we were young and stupid and thought love could change the perceted world without permission. I will not ask you to leave your wife. I do not want to be the reason a good woman cries. I will carry this with patience. Do not come to the hospital. The nurse asked me for a father's name. I said, he is far. That is true. May Allah make our wrongs a lesson for us, and not a rope that drags us. I could feel her pain and her strength in equal measure. The words were both a door closing and a prayer being made. I saw myself on that date, lying on a bed with white sheets, the sound of machines like faraway rain. I had been making dua to get through the next minute. She had been making dua to get through the next breath. We had both been held by the same Lord, and yet we had no idea that our lives were touching in a way that would hurt me to know years later. Yusuf's reply sat under her lines like a shadow. I will stand at the end of the street on Fridays, near the laundry place, he wrote. If you bring her out for a walk, I will see her, from far, and make dua for her. I will never reach out my hand. I will leave the envelope under the mulberry tree's roots and walk away. If this is too painful for you, tell me no, and I will not come. I do not want to add to your burden. I have chosen my path, and I will walk it with responsibility. I will not forget you. I will not forget the child. I will ask Allah to forgive me every day. There was a small mark after that line, as if the pen had paused and he had thought longer than the ink allowed. Then, in a lighter hand, there was something that looked like her again. Do not come near, she had written. If you must see her from far, stand under the big tree across the road where the men fix bicycles. I do not want neighbors to talk. I will pretend I do not see you. That is the only way this can be done without more harm. Bring rose water once a month for my mother's grave. If you remember, she loved it. I closed my eyes. I could see his bottle of rosewater, always in his pocket on those days. I understood now what had looked like quirks of a careful man were bridges he had built between two shores. He had walked them alone, silently. My heart broke for him in that moment, even as it broke because of him. Both broken pieces lay next to each other, like two cups knocked over by the same shake of the table. There were notes in the margin, written in his hand but with different dates, like footprints left across years. "Alia at 5, one said. She laughed when the birds chased each other by the laundry line. I put my head down and cried into my sleeve. May Allah protect her. Another said, "Aliyah at 8. She fell and got up and kept running. She is strong." I thanked Allah and went home and fixed a chair with more care than usual. Then, written many years later in a shaky line that looked like his hand when his fingers had started to hurt, a note that was like a small breath. Zara passed away. Her sister, Rania, left a note under the tree. "Do not come today. We are mourning. We will carry on. Jazakallah for what you did. Do not disturb your home." I went to the cemetery and left one flower. I asked Allah to forgive us all. On the back of the paper, in the same careful woman's hand, there was a recipe for a kind of semolina cake. The strangeness of it almost made me laugh. We write instructions for sweet things on the backs of heavy things. We live like this. There were small stains on that side too. Oil, maybe. Life had touched this paper with many hands and many reasons. I traced the line of the date again, as if touching it with my finger would change it. It did not. I placed the paper on the rug and looked at it from far, as if distance would make it smaller, like looking at a mountain from the next town. It stayed the same size. I could feel in my body the exact moment the world had shifted. It was not at the funeral when the paper fell. It was now, sitting on the rug, in my own home, with my own breath slowing and speeding like someone learning again how to live. I thought of my children. I saw Amina's face when she was small, her mouth open in sleep, her lashes dark against her cheeks. I saw Omar's knees always scraped, his lips orange from the juice he loved. I thought of telling them. I imagined Omar's anger, hot and sure, like his father's when the wood split wrong. I imagined Amina's tears, quiet and careful, falling into her scarf. I imagined their love for their father, strong and bright, and what this truth would do to that light. My chest tightened. I could not breathe easily. I stood up and went to the window. The street outside was doing what streets always do, holding people and their lives without judgment. A boy flew by on a bicycle, his feet off the pedals for a second while he glided. An old man pushed a cart with plants, the leaves nodding as if agreeing with the movement. A woman shook a rug and laughed with her neighbor. The world did not know my heart was changing shape inside my body. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and cried. I cried like a person who has held back a dam for too long. I did not shout. I did not make a drama. The sound was small, like a kettle that sings when it is done. I cried for the girl who wrote the letter. I cried for myself, for the woman who had been a wife in good faith. I cried for a child who had grown without her father's hand on her head and without my arms around her when she cried. I cried for a man who had carried a secret like a stone in his pocket that wore a hole in his skin. When the tears ran out, I washed my face and prayed again. I asked Allah to help me say what I could not say to anyone else. "You are the one who covers our faults," I said. "Cover me. You are the one who knows what is in the hearts. Know mine. You are the one who writes every story with wisdom. Help me believe that, even when my eyes do not understand." I sat again and read the last lines. There were words I had missed before, written in a slanting hand that must have been one of the last entries. Fatima, he had written, not to me, but as if writing to himself, reminding himself of my name. She is kind. She will break if I say this. I will not say it. I will do the small good I can and ask Allah for the rest. If I die before I can fix anything, may Allah fix it for me. I trust Allah. Qadr. Whatever he writes is better than what I plan. I put my hand over his words. My fingers spread across the paper like trying to hold a bird that did not want to be held. I felt anger rise like a heat in my chest, and then it cooled like water poured on a pan. I said out loud into the room, "You should have told me." The room offered no answer. Then I whispered, "Maybe you could not." I remembered nights when he had sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his hands like trying to rub warmth into them, and I had thought it was only the cold. I remembered the Fridays with the rose water. I remembered the times he had looked at the door and then back at me and smiled as if choosing something. I remembered his last words, "Allah is kind." I wanted to scream that kindness would have been truth. But I also knew that kindness sometimes is a shield we hold up to protect someone from a storm they cannot weather. The house made its small sounds around me. The fridge hummed. The wind pressed the curtain and then let it go. My neighbor called to her child from the balcony. Life continued. I folded the letter one more time, carefully, like a prayer. I put it back in the Qur'an. I kissed the cover. I held it to my chest until my heartbeat slowed enough for me to feel like I was still inside my own body. Then I went to the drawer and took out a small notebook of my own. I wrote a few lines. "Ya Allah," I wrote, "put light in my chest. Make me choose a path that is pleasing to you. If I should find the girl called Aliyah, guide my steps and my words. If I should stay away, make me accept that without bitterness. Protect the honor of my children. Protect the memory of their father. Protect my tongue from speaking out of pain. Make me truthful and gentle." As if on cue, the doorbell rang again. My body jumped. I wiped my eyes and went to the door. A woman stood there I had not seen before, with a scarf tied simply and a face that looked like mourning after a long night. Her eyes were familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. She held a small bottle of rosewater. "Assalamu alaikum," she said, her voice formal like someone reciting lines they practiced. "I came to offer condolences. Your husband was a good man." The word "good" echoed in the hallway between us, bouncing off the walls and my ribs. "Wa alaikum assalam," I replied. "Come in." She stepped in and stood just inside the door, not moving farther. She looked at the rug, she looked at the table, her eyes flicked to the shelf, where the Qur'an sat wrapped. Then she looked at my face, really looked, as if trying to find something old and familiar under the new grief. "I am Rania," she said, and the name fell into place like the last piece of a puzzle. Zara was my sister. My throat closed. I did not say anything for a second. The world held a breath. Then I stepped aside so she could sit, and I felt every bone in my body shift to make space for a new kind of pain. We sat across from each other, two women a few steps apart with a sea between us. She spoke first, because someone had to. "He never crossed a line with us," she said. "He was careful. He tried to do what he could without making more harm. I do not come to fight. I come because when a person leaves this world, we must put things in their place." Her eyes filled. She looked older when the tears gathered, younger when they fell. I nodded, too slow. It sounded like someone else borrowing it for a job they did not want. I read it. She closed her eyes and exhaled like a person who had been holding something heavy and had finally put it down on the floor. "Alhamdulillah," she whispered. "Not because it hurts you. I am sorry that you hurt, but because secrets are poisons. They sit in the dark and make everything sour." She looked at me again. And for the first time I saw kindness that was not pity. It was understanding. "It is not your fault," I said, and my voice shook. "It is not even his fault alone. Life sometimes is like a river that changes its path and drowns a field it did not mean to touch." She nodded, tears on her cheeks. "My sister was a good person," she said. "She made a mistake. She did her tawbah. She tried to live quietly. She did not want to take what was yours. She told me often, 'Fatima is innocent. She deserves to live without my shadow over her table.' She prayed for you. She told me to pray for you too." I put my hand over my mouth because a sound had started to come out that was too raw. I took a deep breath and let it out slow. "Where is Aliyah?" I asked, tasting the name as if it were hard candy that might break a tooth. Rania's eyes widened, as if the question surprised her even though it was the only one that could be asked. "She is here," she said. "In the city. She lives with me. She knows a man used to leave an envelope under a tree every month. She used to wave at a man across the road on Fridays who never waved back. She used to ask who he was. I told her, 'He is just a good man who keeps his promises.' She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. She does not know his name. She does not know more." Silence sat down with us. It was bold like a third person who came in without knocking. In that silence, all the words we could say arranged themselves into different shapes. I could pick one shape and live with it for the rest of my life. "I do not want to undo anyone's life," I said finally. "I am an old woman. My children love their father. They should. He was worthy of love. He fed us. He held us. He taught us to pray. He also carried something I did not know. Both things are true. What do we do with truth that can break and truth that can heal at the same time?" Rania looked at her hands. "I do not know," she said. "I came to see your face and say, 'I am sorry.' I came to say, 'Jazakallah khair,' for your hand being the one that was kissed, for your house being the one that held him, for your food being the one that fed him. Because of that, he had strength to still help my sister's child. You were more to him than we were. Please believe that." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to throw the bottle of rosewater against the wall and watch it shatter the way my heart had. Instead, I picked it up and opened it. The smell climbed into the air, sweet and clean, and it settled in my chest like a hand pressed there in comfort. I poured a few drops into my palm and rubbed them on my wrists, the way my mother had done when I was a girl and I had nightmares about getting lost in the market. "Thank you for coming," I said. Rania stood. "If you ever want to see her," she said, "I will not stop you. If you never want to, I will not judge you. I do not know what is right. Allah knows." She began to walk to the door and then stopped. She looked back at me. "She looks like him when she is annoyed," she said softly, a small smile touching the corner of her mouth. "She pushes her lips together like this." She showed me, and I felt a laugh bubble up and break into a sob that I hid behind my hand. After she left, I stood for a long time in the doorway, holding the doorframe as if it would fall if I let go. The hallway smelled like cooking from other apartments, spices and fried onions, the ordinary miracle of life continuing. I closed the "flighted is bold" door and leaned my forehead against the wood. "Ya Allah," I said. "You are closer to me than my jugular vein. Be close now." I went back to the rug. I opened the Qur'an, not to the letter, but to Surah Maryam, where my finger had sat next to Yusuf's last days. I read the verses about miracles and patience, about the way babies are miracles, and so are old trees that give fruit at the right time. The words wrapped around me like a shawl. I cried into them and then came out cleaner. I knew then that my life had two paths now, one where I kept the letter as a private pain and tried to forget, another where I let it guide me to a door and knocked. Either way, there would be no going back to the woman I was before. The secret had changed the color of everything, like saffron dropped in water. You cannot take it out once it is in. You can only drink it slowly and accept the taste. I folded the letter one more time and slid it back in. I kissed the Qur'an. My lips touched the cover where his hands had worn the edges smooth. I whispered, "I forgive you." And then, because my heart is human and not a storybook, I added, "But it hurts." I sat there until the sky outside shifted from the soft gray of evening to the deeper blue of night. I did not know exactly what I would do next. I only knew that the story had shifted, and I was standing on a new shore. The water between then and now was wide. Somewhere across it, a woman named Alia lived and breathed, and maybe looked in a mirror sometimes and did not know that pieces of my face were there. I did not know if I would go to her. I did not know if it was my place. I only knew that Allah had put a letter in my hands at a time when hearts are soft, and He does not do anything without wisdom. Number resolution. The next morning, I woke before the adhan. The air was cool, and the room had that gray-blue light that belongs to dawn. I sat up slowly and listened to the quiet. I felt tired in my bones, but my mind was strangely clear, like a window after rain. I whispered, Alhamdulillah for another day, even though my heart was heavy. I made wudu and prayed Fajr with steady breaths. When I finished, I stayed on the mat and made dua from a place deep inside me. I asked Allah to hold me the way a mother holds a child who has cried for too long. Guide me, I said. Do not let me harm with my tongue. Do not let me hide out of fear. Put light in my chest. After sunrise, I put a scarf around my shoulders and walked to the small women's halaqah near our building. On Thursdays, the older women sit together for an hour. We read a little Qur'an. We talk about daily life. We drink tea and remind each other to be patient in small ways. That morning, I sat in the back, near the window. The teacher, Auntie Zainab, read a verse about truth and mercy. She said, sometimes Allah shows us something at a time we can finally bear it. Not earlier, not later. He is precise. I felt the words fall onto my heart, like soft rain. I waited until the circle ended, and then I went to her. I did not tell her everything. I said, Auntie, imagine you find something that changes how you see someone you loved, but that person has returned to Allah. Do you tell others? Do you keep it? What is the right thing? She looked at me a long time. Her eyes were kind but honest. She said, ask yourself, will telling bring more good than harm, or will it break more than it fixes? Sometimes covering a fault is worship. Sometimes speaking is protection. Do istikhara. Ask Allah to make your chest easy if the path is right and tight if it is wrong. Also, do not forget the rights of those who might be hurt by silence. We do not own truth, we are caretakers. I walked home slowly, her words sitting in my pocket like a small stone. When I reached the apartment, I made 2 rak'ahs for istikhara. I spoke the dua in a whisper, my hands open. O Allah, I said, if this matter is better for my religion and my life, now and later, then make it easy and bless it. And if it is bad for me, then turn it away from me and turn me away from it, and write for me good wherever it may be. After the prayer, I did not feel a sudden sign. I did not see a dream. I felt a simple thing. A calm in my chest when I thought of meeting the girl. A tightness when I thought of telling my children right away. I took that as an answer for now. Answers can be small. They do not always arrive with drumbeats. I sent a message to Rania, the way people of our age do when we are careful. I wrote, if you agree, I would like to see her. A quiet place, no one else. I will not say anything that breaks anyone's life. I promise. She wrote back, tomorrow, at the park near the old fountain, noon. I will be with her. I will introduce you as a family friend. If it becomes too heavy, we will stop. I put the phone down and stood still for a long time. Then I went to the kitchen and took out semolina and sugar. On the back of the letter, Zara had written a recipe. I read it again and smiled through my tears. I decided to make it for our meeting. I wanted to bring something that belonged to both our worlds. I wanted to carry sweetness into a moment that could be bitter. The act of cooking calmed me. I measured semolina, sugar, and yogurt. I stirred with slow circles. The sound of the spoon against the bowl was like a small clock. I let the mixture rest as the recipe said. I greased the pan with tahini, just as she had written. I poured the batter and pressed almonds on top. The oven warmed the kitchen. The smell of baking rose like a memory from a house I had never visited. While it baked, I washed the teacups and wiped the counter. I found an old tin box Yusuf had carved a flower on years ago. It was small and beautiful, made with a patient hand. I polished it and lined it with parchment paper. When the cake cooled, I cut small squares and placed them inside. I whispered, Bismillah, over the tin. My hands were steady. Before noon, I wrapped a light shawl around me and took the tin in a bag. I walked to the park with steps that felt measured by something older than me. The sun was gentle, not too strong. The fountain in the middle did not work anymore, but children still gathered there on their scooters. A woman sat on a bench under a tree with a younger woman beside her. I recognized Rania's face even before she stood. We greeted each other softly. Rania said, "This is my niece." The young woman looked at me with curiosity that was polite and guarded. Her eyes were brown like good tea. Her hair was covered simply. She had a small scar on her eyebrow, the kind you get from falling as a child and being too brave to be careful next time. My heart made a sound I did not let out. "Assalamu alaikum," she said. "I'm Aliyah." Hearing the name in her own voice made it feel like a bell rung in the right room. I smiled, and I felt the corners of my eyes grow wet. "Wa alaikum assalam," I said. "I'm Fatima. I was a friend of someone who cared for you very much." My voice was calm. I handed them the tin. "I brought something, a small thing." We opened it together. The smell of semolina and syrup climbed into the air. Aliyah laughed, surprised. "We make this at home," she said. "We've used the same recipe for years. My mother wrote it on a paper I've never understood. The paper is old and stained. We never throw it, even though it is falling apart." She broke a piece and held it up. "This looks like ours." I nodded. "Recipes travel through hands," I said. "Sometimes they are more than cooking." We ate in silence for a moment. The cake was soft, and the syrup held it together. A little bird hopped near our feet, hopeful, as most birds are. Aliyah told me about her work. She said she volunteers at the library with children after school. She said she paints on Sundays, small pictures of doors and windows. She laughed with her whole face when she talked about the library. She grew quiet when she mentioned her mother. "I lost her years ago," she said, and she looked at the ground for a second. "My aunt raised me like a second mother. We are two hands of one pair." I felt a warmth in my chest for Rania and for the woman she described. I said, "May Allah give mercy to your mother and reward your aunt." Aliyah nodded and smiled towards Rania with love that was easy to see. We talked about small things then. We talked about tea and the weather. We talked about the old fountain that no one fixes. Then Aliyah asked, softly, "Who was the friend who cared for me?" She was not pushy. She was brave and gentle at once. I looked at Rania. She gave me a small nod. I took a breath that went deep. "A man," I said. "A good man, with his share of mistakes like all of us. He used to stand far and make dua for you on Fridays. He used to leave something under the mulberry tree. He never wanted to hurt anyone. He tried to do good in a careful way." Aliyah's eyes grew still. The air between us felt thinner. "The Friday man," she whispered, as if speaking to a memory she had named long ago. "I used to see a man across the road sometimes. He never waved. He would look and then look away. When I was little, I thought he was a shy neighbor. When I grew older, I thought maybe he was my father. But I never knew. No one told me." Her voice did not accuse. It simply opened a door. I nodded. "He was your father," I said. The words left my mouth like birds that had been waiting. "His name was Yusuf." I said it simply. I did not put heavy words around it. I did not tell the whole story, because the whole story belongs to Allah and to the people who lived it. I gave her what she needed to know to stand in truth. She covered her mouth with her hand and cried in a soft, surprised way. It was the kind of cry that does not announce itself, it just arrives. Rania took her hand. I waited. I watched the leaves above us tremble in a small wind. I listened to a child laugh near the fountain. Life makes two sounds at once. "I knew," she said finally, when her breathing slowed. "Or I guessed. I used to smell rosewater, sometimes near the gate on Fridays. I used to find envelopes near the tree when I watered it. My aunt never lied to me. She told me, 'A good man helps from far.'" She looked at me again. "Who are you to him?" She asked it with respect. "I was his wife," I said. The words were heavy and light at the same time. "I did not know about you until he passed away. I found a letter in his Qur'an. Allah chose that time for me to know. Maybe if I knew earlier, my heart would have broken in a loud way. Now it broke in a quiet way, and I could hear Allah's voice telling me to be gentle. I smiled with my eyes. I came because I wanted to see you with my own eyes, and to tell you that you were not forgotten by Him. He carried you in His du'as. Aliyah did not reach for me, and I did not reach for her. We let the truth sit between us and change shape. Then she said, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for telling me. I do not hate you. I do not hate him. I hate the distance that was put between us by our own choices and by life. But I am not Allah. I cannot judge. I can only choose what to do now." I nodded. "I do not want to break my children's hearts," I said. "They loved their father. They should. He was there for us. He was kind and faithful in all the ways I knew. This part of him I did not know. I think, for now, we keep this among us between you, your aunt, and me. Not because you are a secret. You are not a shame. You are a person Allah made with care. But because sometimes protection requires silence. Later, Allah will open a door if the time is right." Aliyah agreed. She said, "I do not need to enter anyone's home with a hammer. I only wanted to know if the story in my head had a name." She wiped her face and smiled. "It does, Yusuf. I will say his name when I make dua. I will say, 'Forgive him, O Allah.' And I will thank him for standing under the tree like a shy guard." We sat longer. I told her about Yusuf's voice when he read Qur'an. I told her how he held a cup of tea with both hands in winter. I told her how he would work on a chair and hum under his breath, just a little tune no one could recognize. I did not tell her our arguments or our private jokes. I chose stories that were light enough to carry on a first meeting. Before we left, I took the small wooden box from my bag. "He made this," I said. "Long ago. I kept it because it is beautiful and because it was his hand that made it. If you want it, I would like you to have it. If you do not, I will keep it and show it to you sometimes." She took it with both hands like a gift from Eid. She traced the carved flower with her fingertip. "I will keep it safe," she said. "I will put small du'as inside. Maybe a ring if I ever get married. Maybe a list of the books I want to read. Thank you." We agreed to meet again, without pressure. "Maybe once a month," I said. "We can walk, or we can sit in my home, if you are comfortable, or yours. We can make tea and talk about nothing." She smiled. "I like talking about nothing," she said. "It turns into something when the right people sit together." When we parted, I kissed her forehead as one would kiss a niece. I did not know what to call myself to her. I did not take the name Mother. That place belongs to Zahra. May Allah give her light. I said, "Call me Auntie Fatima if you want." She nodded. "Auntie," she said, and I heard a thread tie itself between us. On my way home, I stopped at the cemetery. The ground was warm under my feet. The sun made the stone markers look soft. I found Yusuf's place and stood there with my hands open. I told him in my heart what had happened, not because he could hear me as he heard me in life, but because saying things in that place made them settle. "I met her," I whispered. "She is kind. She is yours. I forgive you. I ask Allah to forgive us." I read Surah Yasin for him because he loved the rhythm of it. I read Al-Fatiha for Zahra at her place. I poured a few drops of rose water on the earth, not because the earth needs perfume, but because I needed that smell to rise and remind me of something that had hurt and healed at once. I left with my steps more even than when I arrived. Days passed. Life, in its stubborn way, made me hungry and sleepy at ordinary times. I cooked. I cleaned. I answered phone calls. I laughed with Huda about the cat who stole a fish from the shop. I cried at night sometimes, quietly, into the pillow. Grief and peace sat at my table like two old friends who do not like each other but are polite for my sake. Amina came often. She made tea and told me about her children's school projects. She brought me a scarf with small blue flowers because my old one was fading. She sat at the window and said, "Baba would have liked this weather." I said, "He would have." I did not tell her about the letter, not yet. It sat in my heart like a lamp covered with a thin cloth. Omar fixed the loose hinge on the bathroom door and said, "Baba would have told me to use a smaller screw." We laughed. He said, "I miss him when I fix things." I said, "Me too." He hugged me in that way sons do, strong but trying to be careful with old bones. I held him a little longer than usual. In the evenings, when the house grew quiet, I took out the small notebook I had found in Yusuf's drawer. I copied the few lines where he wrote, "For A." I did not know who he meant, but in my mind I gave those words to Aliyah. I wrote them on a clean paper, the ones where he said, "May Allah protect her," and I cried into my sleeve. I put that paper in the wooden box I had given her. At our next meeting, in a park with soft grass, I gave it to her. "These are his words," I said. "He did not put your name, but I believe they were for you. Keep them if they bring you peace. Burn them if they bring you pain." She read them slowly and pressed the paper to her chest. "I will keep them," she said. "I will read them when I feel alone." Our monthly meetings became part of my life. Sometimes we sat in Rainia's kitchen. Sometimes they came to mine. We made tea with mint and laughed about nothing. We tried the semolina recipe again and again until we made it with our eyes closed. We exchanged plants. She gave me a small pothos with trailing leaves, and I gave her a jasmine cutting from my balcony. Not every meeting was easy. There were days when Aliyah asked questions my heart could not hold. "Did he ever think of coming?" she asked once, her voice soft, her eyes on the table. I said, "He thought of it every day, I think. But he believed staying away was the way to protect everyone. He was wrong and right at the same time. Life is sometimes like that." She nodded, and we let the words sit. There were days when she would say, "When you laugh, your eyes look like his," and I would feel my throat tighten. There were days when I would bring out a dish he loved, and we would eat in careful silence, honoring a person who could not sit with us but who sat in our memories. We were learning a new way to be a family, half in the light, half in the shade. I went again to see Auntie Zainab and told her a little more. I said, "I chose to know. I chose to hold it. I chose to meet the girl." She said, "Then choose to let that choice be a source of good. Sponsor an orphan in their names. Give charity in secret, for the sake of all three, your husband, the woman, and the child. Every time the world reminds you of pain, answer with a small act of mercy." I took her advice. I went to the masjid office and arranged a monthly sadaqah with part of my money. I asked the imam to put it under "Mercy for 3." He did not ask questions. He smiled and said, "Allah knows every name." I felt light walking home. Giving always had that effect on me. It is like cutting hair that has grown too heavy on the head. I also made a will. I am an old woman. I do not know my end. I set aside a small part of what I own for Aliyah, not from my children's share, but from the part I am allowed to give. I did it quietly, with the help of a kind lawyer who kept his eyes polite and his pen ready. I told him, "Do not tell anyone unless Allah has called me back." He nodded. The paper went into a folder. The folder went into a drawer. The drawer closed. Sometimes I sat with my children and felt the letter like a weight in my sleeve. I wanted to say it and be done. I wanted to be honest and brave. But honesty is not only saying everything you know. It is also knowing when silence is a kind of truth. I promised myself that if Allah opened a door, I would tell them gently and without anger. Until then, I would guard their memory of their father because that memory was true in its own way. One evening, Amina said, "Mama, I dreamt of Baba last night. He was standing in the workshop, wiping his hands on a cloth. He looked young." I asked, "What did he say?" She said, "Nothing. He just smiled and looked at the door." She began to cry. I held her, and my tears came too. 2 women in a small room, both loved by the same man, both missing him in different shapes. I visited the blue gate again. I took a few ripe mulberries and pressed them between my fingers. The juice stained my skin purple. I thought of how life leaves marks on us, colors we cannot wash in one day. I pressed a mulberry into my tongue and let the sweetness sit. Across the street, The bicycle repair shop clanged with life. I stood under the tree where Yusuf must have stood and said quietly, "I understand you now a little, even if I wish things had been different." There was a day when I faltered. A cousin came to visit and said something cruel without meaning to, the way people do when they think they are wise. She said, "At least your husband was simple, not like men who keep secrets." I felt the room tilt. I smiled with my mouth and breathed with my nose. When she left, I cried with my face buried in the prayer mat. I told Allah I was tired. I told him I wanted to go back to the time before the letter, and then I got up, washed my face, and made tea. This is how we live. We fall and get up with Allah's help. Summer came and turned the light in our rooms gold. I hosted Aliyah and Rania for iftar in Ramadan. We broke dates and drank water and ate soup with lemon. After Maghrib, we sat close and listened to the Qur'an on the radio. I watched Aliyah's face when certain verses were read, and I saw how her eyes softened at the parts about forgiveness. I thought, she will be fine. Allah writes, good for those who bend towards him. One night in the last 10 of Ramadan, I woke for tahajjud. The house was so quiet that I could hear the night itself. I stood on the prayer mat and felt small in the best way. I whispered names in my dua, my husband, Zara, my children, Aliyah. I asked Allah to make their graves gardens. I asked him to make our homes places of truth without cruelty. After Eid, Omar brought his children. They ran around the table and asked for more juice. I watched them and felt a deep love that made my chest ache. I thought about how every family has rivers under it that do not always show on the surface. Some are clean, some are muddy. All make sounds that children do not hear. I made a silent promise to keep the surface safe for them, as long as I live. I wrote a letter of my own and put it inside my Qur'an, under the ribbon. It was not a secret in the way his had been. It was a guide. It said, "My children, if Allah wills and you find this after I am gone, remember that people are bigger than one mistake. Remember that your father was good to us. Remember that he tried to do right. If you meet someone named Aliyah one day, treat her with the respect you would want for your own blood. Do not speak with anger. Speak with Allah's fear and love in your heart. If you never meet her, then give charity for 3. I wrote it with steady hands. I cried a little. Then I closed the book, kissed it, and put it back. I also wrote a small note for Aliyah to find in her wooden box one day, when I am not here to explain myself. It said, "My dear, you were never a mistake. You are a mercy that came through a painful door. If I could hug the child you were, I would. If I could cook for you on the days you were sick, I would. Since I cannot, I will leave you du'as. Take them when you need them, like sweets from a tin. Remember, Allah is closer than your sadness." Once, Aliyah and I went to the sea. We took a bus early in the morning. The air smelled like salt and stories. We sat with our feet near the water and said nothing for a long time. When we spoke, it was about shells and birds. She collected small stones and put them in her pocket. I watched the waves come and go and thought of breathing, in and out, in and out. This is the thing that keeps us alive when we think we cannot be. I began to sleep better. The dreams about the letter became less sharp. They softened into dreams about kitchens full of people and about my mother baking bread in a courtyard. When I woke, I made dua and touched the wall with my open palm, feeling the cool reality of it. I thanked Allah for the way He lets hearts heal in small, ordinary hours. One afternoon, I fell asleep in the chair and woke to the smell of rosewater. I looked around, half believing that Yusuf had come home with the bottle in his pocket. The room was empty. The smell was probably in my mind or on a scarf someplace. I smiled and said out loud to the quiet, "I forgive you again today." Forgiveness is not a one-time task. It is like prayer. You do it again and again, and it keeps you clean. I still had days of anger. Anger comes like a guest who does not knock. It walks around your house and opens drawers. On those days, I would walk to the mosque and sit under the big tree. I would watch children run and forget the rules of gravity. I would let the sun press on my face and remind me that there is more light in the world than darkness, even if sometimes we stand facing the wrong way. As the year turned, I felt less like a woman whose life had been stolen and more like a woman whose life had been rearranged. The table was still the same table. The tea still tasted like cardamom. The Qur'an was still the same book, full of mercy and warnings, promises and stories. The letter that had hurt me lived inside it now like a small thorn, but I had learned to hold it without bleeding every day. One day, when Amina and I were walking home from the market, she said, "Mama, do you ever feel like you knew Baba completely?" I stopped and looked at her. She was holding a bag of tomatoes. The sun made a circle of light on her headscarf. "No," I said truthfully. "None of us know each other completely. Even the person we sleep next to, we know what Allah allows us. We know what we are capable of carrying. The rest belongs to Allah's mercy." She nodded, thoughtful. She said, "I think I understand." Maybe she did. Maybe she did not. Understanding grows like plants, some fast, some slow. A few weeks later, I visited the workshop. It had a new owner. He showed me a chair Yusuf had made years ago that still sat in a corner. I ran my hand over the smooth back of it. I felt the curve of the wood. The man said, "Your husband used to say, 'Wood is like people. It has a grain. If you push against it, it splits. If you work with it, it shines.'" I smiled. I thought, he understood so much and still was a man, not an angel. That is all any of us are. I brought home a small piece of wood from the workshop with the owner's permission. I placed it near the window. When the sun hits it in the afternoon, it glows. I told Aliyah about it, and she said, "I want to paint it." I said, "Come, bring your colors." She came with a small box of paints and sat on my floor with her legs crossed. She painted a tiny door on the wood with a tiny keyhole. She gave it to me and said, "It is a door that does not require a key. It opens with du'as." I hung it on the wall. When I look at it, I think of all the doors we open and close in a lifetime. Some we slam, some we lock, some we hold with both hands and only let open slowly after asking Allah to watch our fingers. This door on my wall reminds me not to be afraid. Allah owns every door. There is one more thing I did. I visited Zahra's sister's home and asked to see her mother's grave again. We went together with a small bottle of rose water and fresh flowers. Aliyah came, carrying the flowers like a child carries a book. We stood there, 3 women bound by a story none of us chose, but all of us live in. We made dua. We forgave ourselves again. We forgave a man who could not be perfect. We left the rose water on the grave, and the smell followed us back to the street like a soft blessing. My knees hurt more these days, and my hands sometimes shake when I carry the kettle. But my heart, in a strange way, feels stronger. I have learned that pain can be a teacher if you do not turn it into a weapon. I have learned that secrets have a way of asking to be turned into prayers. I have learned that you can love someone and still wish they had chosen differently, and that both feelings can live in peace in the same house. Now, when I open the Qur'an, I do not fear the letter. It is there. It lies between the pages like a pressed leaf. I read the verses, and then I read the past. I place both before Allah and say, "You know, you judge, you heal." I close the book and kiss it with gratitude. It led me into a storm and brought me out with a clearer sky. Ending. I sit by the window now with the afternoon light on my hands. The jasmine on the balcony trembles in a small wind. The kettle sighs and then settles. In the next room, the radio plays a recitation I know by heart. My house is quiet, but it is not empty. It is full of breath, memories, and du'as. Sometimes I think about the woman I was before I found the letter. She was safe inside a story she believed was whole. She was kind and maybe a little proud of her simple life. She did not know about the blue gate, the mulberry tree, the Fridays with rose water. I love her. I do not look down on her for not knowing. She was doing her best. Sometimes I think about Zara. I did not know her in life, but I know the shape of her love. I know the curve of her patience. I know the way she wrote a recipe on the back of a confession, because life always mixes sweet with heavy. I ask Allah to give her light in her grave and to make her forgiven in ways I cannot understand with my small mind. Sometimes I think about Yusuf. I loved him. I still do. I will always feel both softness and ache when I say his name. He was a good man who made a human mistake and carried it with quiet responsibility. He tried to protect me in the way he understood. He tried to protect a child he could not hold. He trusted Allah with the parts he could not fix. In the end, he left the truth in the book that taught him to be true, and maybe that was his way of asking Allah to bring it to light when the time was right. Often, I think about Aliyah. She is not a secret in my heart. She is a name in my dua, a voice on my phone, a smile that sits at my table sometimes. She is the sound of a new laugh in an old kitchen. She is a reminder that Allah grows flowers in the cracks we think are only for breaking. When she calls me auntie, I feel a peace I did not expect to find at this age. What have I learned? I have learned that patience is not silence with a fist. It is a soft hand opening and closing, until the pain becomes prayer. I have learned that forgiveness is a path you walk with small steps, not a gate you open and forget. I have learned that gratitude can sit next to sadness and they do not have to fight. I have learned that destiny is not a prison, but a road laid by someone who loves us better than we love ourselves. If you are listening to me and you are holding a letter in your heart, I pray Allah gives you the courage to open it when the time is right. If you are the one who hid a letter, I pray Allah gives you a way to make it a source of mercy and not harm. If you are the child between stories, I pray Allah writes for you a life that is simple and sweet, with people who choose you again and again. Now, when it rains, I make tea, and the smell of the earth comes through the window. I think of the mulberry tree, the blue gate, the workshop's sawdust, the soft white cloth around the green Qur'an. I think of my mother's words, patience is walking slowly with a heavy heart and trusting Allah to watch your steps. I whisper, you are watching Allah, you always were. I keep the letter where I found it. I keep my own letter next to it. I keep a small rosewater bottle near the window. Some days, I dab it on my wrists and let the scent take me back and then bring me forward. I do not live in the past, but I do not deny it. It is part of the mosaic. It makes the picture whole. Maybe Allah wanted me to lose the story I thought I had, so I could find the truth He had written for me. Maybe He wanted me to hold a strange hand at a park bench and feel my heart widen. Maybe He wanted me to learn that love is not always loud, and that sometimes the bravest thing is to choose peace when you could choose revenge. I pray now for 3 names every night: Yusuf, Zara, Aliyah. I add my own sometimes. I ask Allah to forgive us for what we knew and what we did not know. I ask Him to cover what needs covering and to reveal what brings healing. I ask Him to write for us a meeting in a place where secrets are light and hearts are clean. And when I finish, I say, Alhamdulillah. For the days that hurt, for the days that healed, for the letter that cut and stitched at the same time, for the book that held both, for the Lord who watched me open it and did not look away. I am an old woman. My steps are slow. My hands shake a little when I pour tea, but my heart is steady in a way I did not think it could be. Peace did not come from winning. It came from kneeling. It came from opening my hands to the sky and saying, You are my Rab. I trust you. If there is a lesson in my story, it is this: people are not one thing. Do not throw away a whole person because of one chapter. Do not keep a truth that belongs to healing. Pray before you speak. Cry before you judge. And when you cannot carry the weight anymore, put it down in sujud. Allah will carry it for you. May Allah forgive our dead and heal our living. May He make our homes places of gentle words and soft steps. May He unite broken families in ways that honor everyone. May He write for you a life where the letters you find lead you to Him. Ameen. If this story touched your heart, Please follow the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who might need hope today.